Wait, what am I sharing? Do you see? Do you see the
Yeah.
chart? You see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah, so here is the chart. Oh, my screen sharing thing just looks unusual, but okay, as long as you can see it.
I can see. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like I said, I won't keep it up like the whole session. Because most people don't have any idea what any of it means, and so it might just be a bit distracting. But one thing I did want to, well, before, I mean, you already know this, you're familiar, but I still want to kind of give context, that I am approaching the chart through the lens of evolutionary astrology, which presumes that our soul is on a journey of evolutionary development and that we reincarnate, and with each life we are, yeah, evolving in that direction. And also there are particular things that we're trying to learn and trying to navigate, right? And we talk about our soul's purpose. And when I talk about soul's purpose, that's really about like what are, really it's about like dharma and karma, right? Because the chart is representing the karma and kind of the imbalances that have been created through karma. And so our soul's purpose, and the way that I'm approaching the reading is really about creating a balance there. And what's really interesting about your chart is that you have kind of this um, polarity and like paradox that's present throughout the chart, because your the signs are on the houses of the opposite energy. So let me see if I can explain. So here we have the first house, which correlates to the archetype of Aries and the energy of Aries. Um, but you have your first house in the sign of Libra, which is Aries opposite. And so like your seventh house, which correlates to the archetype of Libra, is in the sign of Aries, which is the opposite of Libra. And your whole
Sounds
chart is
very messy.
no, no, it's not messy. No, it's interesting because it means that there is this paradox present almost in like every area of life, but also this almost like innate balance that's present as well that you have kind of access to. Um, and so yeah, it's just fast. It's just, yeah, it's interesting because like here you have the house of Scorpio, I mean the house of Taurus in the sign of Scorpio, and then across from it, it's opposite, which is the house of Scorpio, but it's in the sign of Taurus, which is Scorpio's opposite. So yeah, it's just like this built-in paradox and balance at the same time.
So what would that mean if we speak from a human perspective?
Right.
Like, this is what I mean. The messiness is my life complete chaos.
Well, that's really what we're going to get into, because so much of
Ah,
the chart is like what you're working toward is the polarity of something, depending on what it is for each person. You're working towards that polarity, and you happen to also have the polarity present in where you are now. So it's like it's supportive, I think. Yeah. And yeah, as we get into the things that I actually see in the chart, I think that's going to make more sense. What I'm saying
mm-hmm.
will become more human and practical. Um, and so, yeah, I'm going to stop sharing the screen now and just kind of get into the meat and potatoes. Um, okay. So, woo, what happened? Oh, there we go. So you are actually like beginning a new cycle, a new cycle of evolutionary development, which is really rooted in this soul desire for freedom. And I'm sorry, my throat has been a little messed up today. Mm. Yeah, so that's this new cycle in which the soul is really trying to experience a sense of freedom. And that's very like, and again, it's happening in the sign of Aries. Like Aries is the start of the cycle, right? The first house, sorry, I misspoke. Your first house is in the sign of Libra, but it's in the first house, which is the beginning, like the beginning of a new cycle. Um, and so it's very connected to the body and sort of to safety and instinct. And it's not really necessarily a rational thing, but it's like on a soul level, that one cycle has been completed. And now the soul is really seeking to break free of certain restrictions and limitations to experience this like rebirth or this new beginning. And this, there are many layers here, but what we can see is that the, I want to explain this, kind of how this has looked in like past life experiences, is that there's a challenge here with relationships and with the way in which you were relating to other people, and that there were maybe some tendencies toward codependency or enmeshment in not necessarily romantic relationships, but just relationships in general. And that some of how that kind of came through or manifested in your soul's desire to experience, like, well, now what is driving it to desire to break free, is that there was almost like this development of your creativity and your creative potential in the past, and you achieved like this level of creative self-actualization. And this is very connected to the sign of Leo and that kind of energy, of wanting to like be seen and to kind of perform. And there's this sort of like, I'm the star and I'm on the stage. And so some of what was happening in the past life experiences is that in order to feel validated or worthy in some way, there became almost like this attachment to the way that you were perceived by others, the way that you were seen and celebrated, for your creativity and your gifts. And it really, like, there came a lot of positive feedback and maybe power and prestige, like through these gifts that you had. And there's also, though, this almost like realization that somehow the self became fragmented, or like a disconnect from the truth of the self, because you almost were like in this role of performance. You entered into this role of performing. And so now there is overall, like, just because kind of these dynamics that were created between you and others that could potentially have been like codependent or some enmeshment there, like there's really this desire to break free and be an individual. But what's interesting is that with this polarity that's happening, it's like you are still actually here to be seen and to shine, and for your gifts to be kind of on the stage, but it's really meant to happen in a sense of like detachment, being detached from the potential outcomes of what that could mean, or like people praising you for it, or really having like your own sense of self-value or self-worth dependent on like what you're putting out into the world. You're very much here to serve the collective with your gifts, and to shine in that way, but without being attached to the praise and the positive feedback
The
that I'm
accolades.
at. Huh?
The accolades and
Yeah. Yeah. And let me just pause. Like what's coming up so far?
for me,
Yeah.
okay.
Mhm.
So true. Especially that new cycle, I'm feeling it,
Mhm.
that breaking free. Um, the relationships, and I think the codependency is, I feel like when you said, especially Lena, about not necessarily romantic ones, I have a lot of people have moved away since I started doing this work, and um, it's almost like before I was just kind of potting along doing things, and so I wasn't triggering anyone maybe. Whereas when, and it was always just sort of to say like, I want to do something meaningful. I want to, like I want to do something that will inspire or um and when I started doing this work now that I'm doing now, I feel really that I don't want to say I like make waves, but I feel like I feel so on purpose and so aligned. Like this is what I'm meant to be doing. And the more I was stepping into this, the more these people that were so close to me, so dear to me, where I was really like I miss them still, right? That's the dependency because I feel like I don't feel like I needed them for something, but I need their friendship or their love or relationship, whether it was family or friends, have moved away and so that's I think how I was when you were saying this. I was like, oh yeah, this did happen. And also the Leo and the shining, like the more I was, so when I started approaching this from like a coachy businessy thing, right? Um and I started focusing on that more, I was hitting a wall. Like it felt very out of alignment for me. But the more I focus on being here of service, like how can I serve? What else? The more I go that way, the more I feel like, oh, like that post will do better or someone new will show up in my world. So I feel like that is what you were saying, that shift and I feel like that's what I'm learning more and more because I had like my head still goes sometimes,
Yeah.
that's the logical thing to do, like structure or put something out or, so
Mm-hmm.
that's how that resonated so very much for me.
Mm.
Everything.
Well, yeah, so you have another interesting thing happening here. So you've entered this new cycle, but what happened actually in the past cycle is that you mastered this ability to connect to the spiritual realm, and to maybe connect to those who have crossed over, like to have visions of things, to be able to communicate with, I don't know, like in other dimensions. Like, and now you have your son in that place where, sorry, again, like this is some astro speak, but Pluto was there before, and now Pluto's in the first house beginning this new cycle, but before it was in the 12th house, which is connected to the supernatural, the spiritual. And now your son is there. This is like a core part of your sense of self and your identity, and it's something that's flowing very naturally through you because it's something that you mastered before. And it's in the sign of Virgo, which is all about being of service. Like this gift is meant to serve people. And it's also interesting because all of that is connected to the area that we can look at to see like career and profession, the midheaven. And so actually your north node, which is very connected to your soul's purpose and the direction it's moving in, your north node is directly conjunct the midheaven. Like they're on top of each other, which means that your soul's purpose is very supported by your career, and vice versa. Your career is very supported by the direction, like the things that your soul is trying to do this to really shine in service of the collective and using your gifts. And you also have the planet Mars there with them, which, if we look at it through the lens of evolutionary astrology, this energy of Mars is pretty new. It's not like, especially in this like context. So with it there, you really do have like a drive and a motivation and a passion for what you're doing, and you're really just like, you're able to make moves toward it. There are a lot of people who almost feel like kind of blocked in that sense, right? And you're very like, it's very supportive for you to create this change in the world through your kind of supernatural gifts. Mm-hmm.
I'm on purpose.
Yeah.
It does feel like this is much either. Like I was never a person that would love going live or showing, like myself so much. So I surprised myself that how am I doing this? But I then again, whenever I switched to that being here of service, like it's not about me being scared of being in front of the camera or whatever. It's not about that. It's about I need to be in front of the camera to say this because it flows out easier than typing or whatever. So that's really fun that you said that. It does feel very aligned. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Um,
Before we move on, can I ask you something? I was wondering about the houses.
mm-hmm.
Could you explain to me like what the houses are, or I don't know if you can and such, but just so I understand, like when you say it's in this
Yeah.
house or that house.
Yeah. So we often speak about like kind of the chart and everything that's present there, almost like it's a theater. And so the planets are the actors in the play. They're the characters. And actually that's the thing. It's like we talk so much about signs in astrology, like in kind of modern pop astrology, right? It's all about the signs, but really like everything is about the planets. Like, so the planets are the actors and the signs are like the costumes they wear, kind of how they present, how they move through the world and act. And then the houses are the stage. It's the area of life where something is taking place. So like the first house is very connected to the physical self, to the physical body, and one's like sense of self and identity. The second house is very, again, it correlates with the sign of Taurus, so it's very connected to um like our foundations and safety, security, financial resources, our inner resources, like our gifts, our skills. It's connected to self-worth. And just around the chart, and again, the houses follow kind of the archetypal energies of the signs. Some people disagree with that, but most astrologers teach that the first house correlates to the sign of Aries, the second house to the sign of Taurus, the third house to the sign of Gemini. And so it's like that. And again, like the houses are the areas of life where things are happening. Is that helpful?
That is very helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much. That brings that context in.
Yeah. And that actually like touches on something else I wanted to share with you, is that you have a very full first house, what we would call a stellium in the first house. And again, that's connected to the body. And with certain planets that you have present there, it feels like the body is very important in this life, that you really came into this life choosing to focus on the body in a lot of ways. And this can manifest in potentially like maybe struggles with body image or the way that you look, or maybe could could, and these are all potentials, nothing is set in stone, but it could also create some health challenges or things that really bring your attention to the body. And there is like this, again, this is very connected to this need to break free in a sense, and it's connected to that archetype of, the first house with Aries and this instinctual, like the body and safety and security of physically. And so these relationship dynamics, like in the ways that they come through in this life, if you have a tendency towards people pleasing or wanting to do, what you feel you should do in service to somebody, or if there are obligations there that create kind of maybe anger, frustration, or resentment, like these things will probably manifest in your body. And what I sense also, like from the work that you do and the kind of channel that you are, I think it would also be really important to hold energetic boundaries, because again, if not, that could have an effect on your physical body. How does
So
that
relevant.
resonate?
Yeah. I feel definitely the energetics. I feel like I'm getting it, but I still, then something new will come up. I'm like, oh, I didn't expect this. So I didn't have boundaries there. But also in terms of the physical health issues, especially like my family and stuff have long histories of all sorts of, in this particular health issues. But even when I think back to my childhood, such teenage years, body image was such a big thing. I mean, I know when we go through puberty for a lot of, especially maybe girls, that is, but it was like everything, like, like I disliked everything about myself, and it was reflected back as well. So that was definitely a big thing. And I am now, I think I've started doing work as well around loving, but like I know we talk about being positive, like having this positive body image and talking about, but I'm not even just talking about the body or how it looks, but talking to my cells, talking to my body like as if it's a sentient being. Just, yeah, especially where I feel like aches or pain somewhere, or like just to strengthen it. So I started doing that work, so that was really interesting that you've mentioned this.
Mm. And what is like kind of how, I don't know, yeah, like your relationship to your body now and the way that it feels like when you're under stress, like how do you take care of your body? I mean, I think you just spoke to that in a sense, but
Yeah, no, on the nervous system sort of way, that's another thing. Again, it's interesting how I've picked the family, not my immediate family, but even the extended family, because they have taught me, or they have shown me or instilled in me, you got to be on guard, you got to be in fight or flight, and even sometimes still, thinking about certain members of the family, or if I know, they're going to be there, I noticed that it was still creating a reaction in my body. And so that I had to do a lot of work on that. And I think meditating, when I started meditating, that helped really a lot. So to me, it was interesting that the more I was sort of working with, okay, how can I become stronger and more resilient so I don't react to even just thinking about them, at the same time, because it was just things like, sometimes, I mean, there was certain toxic group, but sometimes it was just up and down relationships, right? But as I was doing work on myself, meditating, and that brought me down this path, they started moving away, like almost I was repelling them, with that. So that was interesting, that connection there as well that I just thought of when you mentioned this.
Mm. Yeah, and what you said in the beginning about your family kind of like in this like stuck in scarcity. Um, there's actually a trauma signature here. This again, this is trauma coming in from past lives, but so very often, right? In some way, it's going to manifest in this life as well. There's a trauma signature coming in around the core like security of the self and feeling almost like your survival is threatened, and this could be connected to past life experiences um of that actually happening in very like extreme ways, maybe natural disasters or a famine or being kind of oppressed or imprisoned within a totalitarian regime. Like somehow there was like this actual physical threat to safety,
Oh
and
yeah.
that like trauma, right, that feeling or whatever, that kind of energy has been carried over, and so there could be, yeah, I mean, maybe like right in childhood
So
you're
definitely.
surrounded by this narrative, and it could also lead to just like a lot of protective mechanisms or desire to protect oneself, and to kind of like avoid anything that could create uncertainty or crisis, and maybe there could be challenges there around new, like the threat that newness presents, and yeah, there could really be almost like this sense of like I need to build this like wall around me to protect me from all of the harm that could come from outside. um
So true. There was definitely, I mean, my grandparents, great grandparents went through the first and second world war, and then so there was that.
yeah.
Then living in, I mean, in Poland, some of my family members believed it was this communist country, and they had to flee and become um, political asylum seekers or whatever, which. And so that energy must have embedded itself somewhere, and then they come, like here, they've migrated to Canada, and where it's peaceful and you can like breathe out and relax, but they're still holding, and there's definitely a lot of trauma, and I believe that we have come together again because of unresolved karmic
Mm,
um yeah, issues. And again, it's not so much my immediate, like my dad, my mom, they're beautiful, but it's the family overall. It's like the extended. So I so resonate with, and actually just connected the dots for me that their pains and their behavioral patterns or their toxic, how toxic they are, narcissistic, isn't just that that's how they are, but through the environments, through, literally generations that has
yeah.
come down.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah, and I
fascinating.
think a lot of times when I'm looking at like trauma signatures, or even with the like the core evolutionary intention of the soul, like what is really driving the soul in terms of growth, like I often find that those things are connected also to like ancestral, yeah, it's not only patterns in our own like past lives, but in our lineage too, that are coming through in those signatures. Um, and since you have mentioned your family a bit, I was very curious to know kind of what was your relationship with your mother like, or like how did you perceive her or felt that you were perceived by her?
It's interesting that everyone goes to my mom, and my mom is like the um that lineage of the psychics, which she never, I don't think she ever lived and was aware. I don't know. I had, so my mom passed away when I was young, like 17.
Mm.
And I think because we've gotten to, I want to say, I loved my mom. She was always like, when I think of her, she was always home. It was, a warm, loving, environment that she has created. she, like I love her. There was a lot of she wasn't a kind of like, I don't ever remember us playing on the floor, like that sort of, but at the same time, I would never say, oh, she was cold or she didn't want to have anything. It's just like we coexisted, and she created this space where she's at home. So I know when I come home from school, she's there, but at the same time, she had her hobbies, or she had things that she would do. Um, and then as we got more into teenage years, I would say we clashed, or I clashed, because I was just not a teenager. So looking back, there are moments where I'm like, yeah, I wasn't very nice, um, and then she passed away, so we never had the chance to like kind of grow and heal that, or build, in
Yeah.
this plane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so the moon often represents our relationship to our mother, or like a maternal figure. You actually have your moon in the eighth house, which is the house of death. And that's interesting. I mean, doesn't necessarily mean that your mother will pass away if that's where your moon is placed. Um, but yeah, it's just interesting that it's there in the house of death and loss. And often when people also have their moon there, it could signal that there was like a sense of emotional insecurity connected to that parental figure. Um, and I mean, I don't know if that's true for you or not, but that
Oh yes.
potential with that placement. And then you also have the moon is like right beside Chiron, which is its own beast, and it kind of operates differently than the rest of the planets because it's not a planet. But and I actually, I know very little about it. It's not something I've studied in depth, but based on its placement, I would think that um there's almost like a core wounding that was birthed through your relationship with her, and that could very well be connected to the loss of her as well, right? This core wounding, which actually shows that one of the gifts you have, or like one of the things you're helping people with, is learning how to be more earthed and embodied. um
Wow, I really
and
felt that in my body. That was
yeah.
beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah. There is definitely, because she passed away when I was, like just coming out of those teenage years, and I started appreciating her. But at the same time, as I was having my own children, I didn't have my mum to kind of check in with her and stuff. So I feel like I do have perhaps this mother wound somewhere, and it has come up for me that I don't know if I still do. I don't know where that's at, but I used to put women that I looked up to on a pedestal, right? That mother figure. And then if they did something completely human that but somehow disappointed me, that figure came down, and I really like, I can't even, like, because you let me down so much, and I didn't understand like why. I love this person, I adored this person, what happened, like, so that is really interesting that is coming up in my chart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious if you kind of emotionally self-soothe with like indulgence or comforts, like I need some chocolate or some ice cream, or get into this really nice
I
like
used to.
blanket and
I used to. I wonder whether my yarns have replaced that now, because I just like to have them around, and then, or shopping. I don't know
oh
if
yeah.
that's another thing. There used to be these, when I didn't understand, where, yeah, it was the eating, or um
Mm-hmm.
uh, and it wasn't maybe so much that I was eating and then putting on weight, and I was like, oh, so then now I have to lose it. It was more not nourishing my body well, like eating food that wasn't good for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the shopping as well. And I think honestly, till a few years ago when I started meditating and going down this path where I could see this higher perspective of what is happening, shopping was definitely like something that I thought, I need that, so that fix,
Yeah.
that temporary fix. So so you think that could be where that's from?
Yeah, because so your moon, as I said, it's in the eighth house, um, but it's also in the sign of Taurus, and so our moon represents, what we need to feel emotionally safe and secure. And so it was funny, like when you said shopping, I was like, because Taurus is all about like the food and the comfort, and yeah, the shopping, like spending money, and I want to spend it on things that make me feel beautiful, or like things that I can appreciate the beauty of, like maybe art or something, right? But yeah, like this desire to be surrounded by beauty, but also like uh, yeah, like
Superficial?
what?
Superficial?
No, not necessarily, but just like these things that's just how it's almost like your soul feels soothed, or like, yeah, I want to indulge in these treats, or like eat these things, or like whatever I'm perceiving it as bringing me comfort, right? um and that is very connected to the emotional self, and potentially like an emotional insecurity that was created through the loss of your mom. Mm-hmm.
That is fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. So I would say this could be my yarn problem. I'm a yarn hoarder. I know. I know. That is good. Wow. Connecting the dots here, Lena.
Wow, so you just said you're a hoarder, is that what you said? Yeah.
Well, yeah, with yarn, I would say definitely. I dream of
Mm-hmm.
having a room where I just walk in and I'm surrounded by my. It's funny, but I did have with shopping. It's just that I think when I found myself on this spiritual path, I learned just literally overnight how to detach from these physical. This is why I asked what are superficial, because they started to feel superficial to me. It wasn't nourishing or
Mm-hmm.
soothing anymore. It felt, because I felt guilty afterwards. So it was this, so I became more about experiences. The more I was going down my spiritual path, I realized I actually don't care about the physical objects that I have. I care more about the experiences that I get.
Yeah.
So that was like, my wedding, for example, is one of them. I didn't really care about engagement ring or wedding ring or anything. Like, I mean, if we have to have something, let's get whatever. But I wanted just the institution of marriage, and I just wanted to be married. I didn't care about the wedding, but I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be married, the experience of being
Yeah.
married. So yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I think like the things, right? The possessions, which yeah, it's very Taurus, material possessions. And yeah, why I said like I don't think it's inherently superficial, but I do think that it is trying to fill some kind of void with things that can't fill it, right? It not necessarily superficial, but mm, superfluous.
Yeah, wow, I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So what does that mean? If the moon is in a Taurus day now, does that mean that I will have this problem for the rest of my life? Like, I call it a problem, but let's say, like this need to shop or need to eat or whatever. Like, even though I think I've cured this or I healed this or I've processed this, does it mean it's going to come back, or is it a permanent thing?
I mean, it is kind of like the way that you're wired to desire that. And I don't think it's bad, right? Like it's not a bad thing to soothe or comfort yourself in that way. It's just like, are you using it in to replace like what actually needs to be present for emotional security to happen, right? Because those things, they can provide comfort, and that's not a bad thing, but they're not going to fill that need, you know?
Right. So if we get something like this in a chart, and we think of it as a bad thing, right? Um, and you're saying that that's kind of how I'm wired. So to me, that says, oh, that's a permanent thing, right? So I'm stuck with this. So how can, like, is there anything that we can do, or like accept that this is a positive thing about us is going to make it serve us better, if you know what I mean, instead of going for the rest of my life thinking, oh my God, I've got this, you know,
Right.
negative aspect of me.
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't say that it's negative or that it's a problem or that,
Mm.
like it's a bad thing. I think it's just about how do I, because here's the thing with all of astrology, there is a range. So with the archetypes, we have kind of a lower expression of the archetype and a higher expression of the archetype. So like for example, with Taurus, maybe one of the lower expressions is that sign can be very like rigid and stubborn and just like set in their ways. But on the other side, the higher expression is like they're so loyal and committed and they will see something through, right? Like this is Taurus energy. And so it's really just about, with all of the different energies represented, is like how am I nurturing and developing and cultivating a more healthy relationship to that way of being, right? So again, like it's not bad to feel comforted by these things, but are you doing that in an unhealthy way, in a way that is actually harming you? Or is it actually like being done in a way that like, okay, I'm being comforted and I know that is what this is for, but I'm not like doing it
Serves to me.
excessively or with like an attachment to it or a dependency on it, right?
Or
Yeah.
with guilt and shame.
Right.
Yeah, totally
Right.
get it. Okay, so it's
Yeah, exactly.
basically, yeah, reframing it and seeing the positive in it as opposed to thinking it's a burden, a negative thing.
Right.
Gotcha.
Right. Yeah, because there's nothing wrong with the way you're wired at all. It's just that sometimes we develop an unhealthy relationship to something, right? And it's just about, yeah, relating to it in a different way. Mhm.
Well, like with anything, I guess, in this world, right? But it has, anything has two polarities, right? Like there is positive, negative, and it's just which way you choose to focus.
Mhm.
Thank you. That makes sense. Then that's something I need to like
Mhm.
get rid of, and you
Mhm.
can't.
Mhm. Yeah, but definitely like as you said, it not something to feel like guilt or shame about. Like, yeah, we definitely don't ever want like astrology to make us feel that way,
Mm,
because it really is all about like the potential of what is possible for us when we harness the energy that is available to us in these healthy, positive ways. Mm-hmm. Um, Sorry, I'm just skimming through my notes.
it's amazing how much you have connected the dots already for me and got me thinking about moments in my life that I haven't thought about in
Mm,
such a long time.
mm. Well, I'm glad it's resonating. Um, so a few, let's see. You have like the planets Mercury and Jupiter are very like central almost to this soul's evolutionary desire to break free, and to experience a sense of freedom. And with Mercury there, that has a lot to do with the way you think, the way you communicate, the way that you share and transmit your ideas and information. And with Jupiter there, it's all about belief in self and faith in the universe, like belief in self and belief in a greater force. And also humility and service. Like all of these things are working together to help you achieve this evolutionary intention of the soul to experience freedom. And relationships are just really significant in this process. Like, to really have healthy boundaries in your relationships, again, like coming back to what I talked about with like some of these past life patterns with potential like codependency and enmeshment. So it's like, again, and with this polarity that's present in your chart, this like inherent polarity, it's like you probably, I think, I mean, based on what I see, like you have really a skill and a gift at kind of cultivating harmonious relationships and just and fair and balanced relationships. And that's really amazing. And you're learning how to be, like, to stand in your own truth, in your own power, and in your own self in that. So like, again, like kind of moving away from unhealthy dynamics in relationships of like people pleasing or maybe unconscious manipulation to like try to win over people's affection or praise or adoration. And you're really learning to like detach from the need to be, I guess, like validated by others, um and to find like any sense of self-worth through others. But you're very much still meant to be learning and creating your own sense of freedom through your connection to other people and through your relationships. But again, it's like, it's really about creating more healthy dynamics than what we can see have come in from some of the past life experiences. um and you have two what are called skipped steps in the chart, which is like kind of a lesson or a challenge or obstacle that your soul struggled with before in a past life experience, like had the intention of like, okay, I'm going to work with this, but maybe like didn't really fulfill that intention. And now some of those patterns are repeating, but also in a way where you have more access to your own personal power when it comes to moving through them, because it's something that you've faced before. And I just want to say that skip steps are incredibly common. Like, I see very few charts that don't have them. And one, so there, I think I mentioned there are two. So one of them is really around, um, yeah, and this is, I think, where this like evolutionary desire to break free, I think it's very like, it's very connected and rooted in this, which is this skips sorry this skip step around um your personal will, and this kind of almost like pressure to choose between the ego and the soul.
My
And
life's work.
yeah, exactly. And it's like there's been this like this question around like, well, how do I express myself in the world? Is it like through the ego or through the soul? And part of what you're really learning is like, I'm expressing it through the soul. And this could also result in this like really this feeling of intense internal pressure, to kind of to really act on like your true desires and your true wants, and to move in the direction of like, yeah, of what's really aligned from you, but from a soul centered place. um and and again, it's like, if this is one of those things, like if you're not working with that, or if you are just kind of like avoiding that, it could manifest in the physical body. but yes, I really do think that this is something in this life that you are you're really like,
It's going back.
yeah, you're really working with that and through that. Um, and then the other skip step is connected to how you relate to other people. And so this could lead to either just like completely isolating oneself and wanting to like cut oneself off from connection, or to be just like overly involved with other people, right? Like this is how it can manifest in unhealthy ways. So again, like you're learning how to create this balance in your relationships, and with the way that things are placed in your chart, it's the energy is very supportive of learning how to create that balance and being like a really free, independent, sovereign individual within the context of relationships that are really characterized by balance and fairness and equality. Um, and yes, and also with this skipped step, this connection to um body image and self-acceptance around the body and the how you appear, what you look like. Um this is also very like tied into that. And so there could have been these struggles with that in past life experiences. Um and uh yeah, like there might have that's this is interesting because I think it connects to what we were talking about earlier about creating like a healthier relationship to things. Because in some cases this could now manifest as, right, like seeking temporary emotional or material satisfaction through things, um and through, yeah, just like, again, because this is the planet Venus, so it's connected to the sign of Taurus, like everything we were talking about before with like shopping and food and material possessions, like this skip step is connected to all of that as well as relationships. um yeah,
That's
and so
fascinating.
again, like that is just learning to create a healthier relationship with those maybe tendencies or inclinations. um yeah, any
That is,
thoughts?
yeah, I'm just sitting here like in awe, but because I always say like I've got days where I'm like, I just want to live on a deserted island and then just connect with people via Zoom so I can have my space, and because sometimes interacting is so hard, and and then other days like I think like I go like, I just want to network. I want to meet people that are like me, and I want to have this little us to be a little community, and it's just so there's definitely like from one polarity to another polarity, and that ever learning of um finding that balance,
Yeah.
but also I think when I really energetically connect with, okay, who I want to call in, I call in more people that are more aligned with me. Whereas if I focus on like my mind, my ego, I connect with people that don't necessarily feel aligned with me or are not into same similar things, and then they like then I feel like we what's the word I'm looking for, not like have to compete, but I feel like, oh, I need to care about this as well, or I need to like someone who has, I don't know, let's say aesthetic clean beautiful house, and I'm like, oh, like I want to go shopping now and I want to like bring all these things into my house because I feel like my house, like that's the thing. You should be able to, you should know. And those who know me know that, I don't normally give much value to it. Like, people who know exactly how to decorate their house, and they would find in a shop this little vase. They're like, oh, I need this because it brings everything together. Whereas I would walk past it, right? But when I'm with people like that, when they're more in my I feel like, oh yeah, I should care about this as well. I'm a girl and I da da da, and I should. And plus, being a Virgo, you're supposed to be very neat and kind and earthy, and that's another thing I never really resonated with my Virgo sign,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I'm not. I mean, I am, loving the earthy colors and being grounded and all that stuff. But the tidiness, cleanliness, almost OCD like, I'm like, that's never been me. Since I was a child, I was a chaotic storm. So that was one thing that I never resonated with. Is that
Mm-hmm.
common?
I think so. Yeah, a lot of people don't resonate with their sun signs, and again, I think that's because like all of the astrology that we're consuming, like from the internet or magazines or whatever, it's focused on the sun, but there's so much happening in your chart. And I think that there are other planets or combination of planets or things that actually impact us even more. And so and yeah, I mean, just if you're just going to talk about the sun, it's such an incomplete picture. And
Mm.
I think it makes sense for a lot of people when the things that they read about their horoscopes or whatever, like that they don't resonate. And then also you have your sun in the 12th house, which is like the most hidden, elusive, mysterious house. Like it's the hardest one to really describe or put into words. And I think like with that kind of energy present there, that is also impacting how the sign manifests, right? It's not like this clear representation of like stereotypical Virgo. No, because there's like a lot of nuance and complexity that's present in that house. And I think that makes sense that it would come through in how you experience the sign as well. Um, and what I think really does reflect like you in the sign is like the sign of Virgo is the sign of service and really offering something to humanity, and being of service in your day-to-day life. um and again, with the 12th house here, that's connected to your sort of supernatural gifts. And even what you said about like sometimes I just want to go like isolate myself on an island. um Again, like with the sun in the 12th house, people with that placement, they do need solitude and they need periods of isolation and time away because you are really energetically absorbing a lot from everything and everyone. And so those periods of like stepping away and kind of being in like spiritual solitude, like that's very supportive for you. And you have to be careful that it's not like to an extreme of like I'm completely withdrawing and isolating myself from society. um Again, it's all about that balance, right? Like I do it in order to care for myself, but not as a way to almost sabotage myself.
Mm.
um
Yeah.
and what I was going to say something else with that. Oh yeah, because also this is a house of where if people have a lot happening here, they could be very inclined toward like escapism and drug use and like addictive behaviors. And so that's kind of like going to the other extreme, right? Like there's this one side of being very connected to the to other realms, to spirits, of being just very in tune spiritually. And then there's like some people who feel that like too strongly and they don't know how to
ground themselves and be
Yeah,
present.
exactly. They
Yeah.
can't ground and they're just so like woo. And a lot of people who have significant placements in the 12th house, like famous people when you study charts and stuff, they're people who have committed suicide or have had overdosed on drugs because they couldn't handle like that that energy that can be very difficult to navigate if you're very out of balance, right? Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting. You know, my spiritual mentor now, my friend, that saw a video of me. This is how we connected. The first thing she said, "Oh my God," she messaged me while I was like doing this live video. She's like, "You need protection. You need crystals, right? Because you're so open and susceptible to these energies." You know, and she was really onto it straight away. I mean, when we connected, she explained the whole thing that I absorbed so much that I could easily get lost up there. And she goes, "It's so important for you to stay grounded, not to think that in order to connect, channel, or go into the Akashic records, you have to go up there." Because she goes, there are people who do that and they spend so much time, they don't want to come down. So then navigating through earthly life becomes really, really hard. So that
Yeah.
was really interesting because she picked up on that straight away, like just from watching the video.
Mhm.
And that's obviously what you're saying, yeah, as well,
Mhm.
Lena.
Yeah, and I think that with this concentration of planets in the first house, like I think part of the reason your soul has chosen to have a focus on the physical body is because if not, that's exactly what could happen to you, right? Like that you just be like floating in the in the ether, like woo, and
So can
totally.
I tell you something interesting? Actually, when you said that, I just remembered in my initial meditation session where I had this huge awakening and like all this stuff, like I saw past lives. Um, After I finished telling my husband, my friend, everything, I was still going, you know, and I closed my eyes and I remember they were showing me like me in a past life, but back then I didn't even have a point of reference. So I don't know. I look like I'm 13 or 14. I had pink short hair, but I couldn't quite place it because I felt like an adult. So I was like, you know, like a fairy that, you know, they are supposed to be full grown, but they appear childlike, right? And so I had this feeling, and I was like bopping around, and I wasn't listening. They were like saying you have to pay attention, and then it was interesting because they were showing me that I came into this life to really be in a body that was challenging, not physically, like, you know, some people are born with certain ailments, but more just the perception that I would have and coming to terms, like finding this alignment, right? And then they were showing also with me that like being an adult, being responsible, like being really weighed down by the responsibilities of this earthly life is part of why I came here, because I was like, when I'm not in my embodiment, I was just bopping around, right? Like that's how they were showing me. And again, you know, obviously that was my level of awareness and comprehension back then. But they said that, you know, the body and having children so young and, you know, like all this stuff was very much to ground me, to make me more responsible and really responsible, not the way I guess we think of it, but just more not floaty, not airy fairy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, I kind of smirked when you said responsible because you have like the planets, one of the planets that's here in this first house connected to the body is the planet Saturn, which is really all around um yeah, responsibility and discipline and structure. And so it's like you're learning these things through your body or your relationship to your body, like how to be more disciplined and structured and
Mm.
just like yeah, more connected to the earth rather than
Floaty, airy fairy,
yeah.
which I was as a child as well. People always said she's off with the fairies and airy fairy, and I wasn't paying attention, and I would always trip and fall, and I would hurt myself and get all these bruises on my body.
Oh,
So it's interesting, right?
yeah, yeah, that's some very first house stuff there. I have my first house is in the sign of Aries. So I'm like, I was the same as a kid. I was just like knocking myself everywhere and I was covered in bruises. I was so clumsy, like so clumsy. And it's changed now, like it's shifted a bit. I mean, still a little bit, but not not to that
Yeah.
extent. But yeah, and that's that energy of, again, because it's the same energy. Like I have this sign of Aries, and this, and for you, this just like packed first house is like Aries energy is just like, I got to do the thing and I got to move and I got to like, it's just like very, yeah, it's very survival driven and like
Mm.
instinct based. And so like I have like also a tendency to like walk super fast. I think it's such like an Aries rising thing. I'm just like, and if somebody's like in my way, I'm like, just move. Like I was just telling somebody the other day, like one of my biggest pet peeves is like when people like just like meander on the sidewalk and I can't like bolt past them. Yeah, it's such an
Oh,
energy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. That is so. We're learning our lessons.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, let me have, I'm, I've shared most of what I wanted to, but let me just skim through to make sure there wasn't anything important that I'm missing. Um,
While you're doing this, can I ask you, Lena? So if someone so this would be like an overview kind of session, right? Like I'm getting an overview of, so if let's say I wanted to know now specifically about relationships, love relationships, romantic, whatever, or work, does
mhm.
that mean like what you brought up, you just zoom in on something, or do you bring up a different chart, or how does it work?
Mhm. Yeah, so I'm a little different maybe than most people who offer readings, because most people who offer readings will offer like a wide variety or like type of readings. So you could very well book a reading with somebody that's just focused on your relationships or just focused on your career or just focused on your physical body. I mean, there are people who specialize in medical astrology and like they look at the chart completely differently. Um, but yeah, most people working with charts are going to offer these kind of options of like going deeper into one area. And I don't actually do that. I don't have that in my offerings because for me, I don't really see myself as like an astrologer or that's like the focus of my work. I'm really just using it as a tool in my coaching practice. So as I'm kind of guiding people along, I mean, yeah, purpose, what I'm using this reading for is really to bring awareness and clarity to what, for most people in most cases, like the different things that are disconnecting them from their own personal power, their own self-sovereignty. um and so it's really like we are using the reading as a tool to gain more conscious awareness. And then with coaching, we're like working through the different
Specific.
challenges or obstacles that have come up through the reading and how that like plays out in the lived experience. So I'm not like, my work isn't really focused, right, like on astrology.
Gotcha.
I'm just using it as a means to an end, I
To
suppose.
understand them. Yeah, I totally get it. So if we would have now finished our session, let's say, with you, what would be my next step with you?
Yeah, so the next step would be like a set of one-on-one sessions where we really like dive into all of this stuff more deeply, and do coaching around it. And I had, what I was doing for a long time was something called Rebirth, which was like a 12-week container of weekly coaching sessions, and I would like customize the container based on um on the themes that I saw coming through the chart. And pretty much without fail, I could easily create something for every person that touched on 10 different key themes that I saw emerging here and that we could work through in those weeks together. But I actually received some feedback from a somatics coach that she was like, I think for people to see the proposal of like the custom coaching plan is actually really overwhelming and like a shutdown to the nervous system. And so I made a tweak on based on her recommendation to just say, hey, like I'm offering either a 6-pack of sessions or a 12-pack of sessions. And it's just like to support you through the process of moving through these things. So we could meet weekly or bi-weekly or just monthly, depending on what that person has capacity for. And so that's what I'm doing now. And then I'm going to launch, I'm going to launch it soon, but it's going to begin in October, a group program, a group container called Phoenix Rising, which is really about
goosebumps.
Oh, yeah, and that's all about becoming the self-sovereign leader of your own life. And so I've kind of identified like 10 pillars that I think really define and support self-sovereignty. And I want to move through those with people. And I want that to be a place where I direct people like following soul sessions, because so much of what comes up in a reading typically is around like what has almost like ruptured somebody's self-sovereignty, right? Like what is kind of disconnecting them from that. And so I think like to move into this program after would be so empowering, because it's like we're actually really working through that stuff in a very targeted, focused way. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Because then it's like you have all this information, which for me today, so many dots were connected. Like I said, you got me recalling, or memories were popping up that I haven't thought of for such a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And, like I would now imagine that if someone is feeling the same way after this amazing session, that they'll be like, okay, well, I've got all this information. What do I do with this now? Like, what
Right.
does this mean? Like, even the shopping, thing that I told you, like in my head, I'm like thinking, so this is permanent? I thought I worked through this, right? So, like, even helping with, like, even just like you said, it's a reframe and seeing as a positive, as opposed to this burden or negative aspect of you that you will continue to feel guilty and shameful for the rest of your life. So I think this is such a lovely whether it's the session or that Phoenix Rising container that would then make people jump into as the natural next step, where you feel held,
Yeah.
looked after, and just kind of not just let's open this wound and leave it, right?
Right. Yeah.
But like, okay, well, this is how we can heal this or
Mm-hmm.
expand this or amplify it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of people too maybe don't even realize like the importance of the follow-up support, because exactly what you said, like let's open this wound. And then I think like the people who don't take me up on that, so maybe not all of them, because I think a lot of them are very like right capable of.
Well, they want the next step. Like, I
Right.
want to do, you know,
Right. But
what's the
yeah,
point
but
of
I think.
knowing all this if we can't, use it to something, make something better? Or
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I do think that like people who don't take that sort of next step are maybe, yeah, left feeling like, oh my God, like overwhelmed by everything.
do
And
you know what it
obviously
is?
I don't want
Yeah.
that. What?
Oh, sorry. No, I was just saying, because I experienced the same thing with sessions, and I had to make adjustment with, instead of like just going this one session, this karma session, that's a healing session, like guidance comes through from the Akashic records, like practices, like in your physical world, this is what you do, or energetics. And, in a session, like even now, I know that, oh, I feel excited. I feel great. This was amazing, right? So you feel like, wow, something has shifted or changed, or I've got this new perspective on something. And then like you tell yourself, yeah, I'll do the practices to
Mm-hmm.
integrate or ground. And then you go off and something comes up, or you don't have the time, or you think, oh, I'll start again, next week, and you never do. And then it kind of like becomes this temporary enlightenment instead of this grounded, in your body, like permanent change.
Right.
And so that's what made me realize that, okay, we need something after this, we need something. And then obviously, you know, if you want to take that next step, you can. But I feel like when you have someone, and I don't like the word accountability, it's
Mm-hmm.
very coachy like, but I guess having someone to walk beside you and
Yeah.
just go like, that practice, have you done that practice? Or like if I come to you and I said, oh my God, my life is falling apart, this and this, like which I experience a lot with my clients. And I'm like, have you done the practice? No, I don't have the time. But that's the practice that will
Right.
bring peace, right? Like
Right.
that thing will bring
Right. This is,
peace.
yeah, that's what I like tell people is like, okay, the reading is creating awareness, but there needs to be more, something beyond, in order to actually like create change, right? To create a shift in that. And so that's even why, like, I mean, you and I were doing this exchange. This is something a little bit different. So I'm just doing a standalone reading with you, but I have packaged like soul sessions as a two-part process. So we do the reading, and that's followed up a week later by a coaching session. And I tell people, okay, like, reflect on what came up in the reading and what feels like the most pressing, or like the most like, I really want to address this thing. And that's what we focus on in the follow-up coaching session, so that there is something for them to work with. Because in that session, right, they receive coaching around that. We go into that one theme deeper. I give them recommended like practices that they can do afterward. And so that was my attempt, right, to kind of build in at least some support, because I don't want to just like like send
Let's
people
scratch the
off.
wound open. There you go.
Yeah.
Oh, I love this so much. This was so wonderful. This was so
Thank
beautiful.
you.
Thank you.
Thank
It
you.
was really, it felt like a homecoming. I haven't
Oh.
felt this since like I had that session where I believe I went into the Akashic Records without knowing. And that was probably, I haven't felt this homecoming feeling until now.
Thank you. That's beautiful. I'm so glad. Yeah, and I'm
So
really
grateful.
excited for my reading with you.
I
Yeah.
know. I know. I can't wait. It'll be perfect because I think it'll be after my lion's gate here, but you will still have before, so it'll be beautiful to integrate or marinate all these things that will come through.
Hmm.
Um, so I know that you're not, like just an astrologer per se, right? Who lives there and does all this, just focuses on that. But what is your experience, I guess, with um this Lionsgate energy? Because my astrological knowledge is very limited, right? Aside from the fact that I know that this we have this these energies because Sirius and the Sun and Earth are in alignment in this particular month, and it creates like this prism of light that's very um, focused and very intense because of that, because it's like, going down to earth. So that's how we see it from the spiritual perspective. But how is the Lionsgate seen from a astrological, or from your experience,
Um,
knowing more?
well, I think I told you when in our last conversation that I don't really like kind of follow
Yes,
the current
yes.
things, and that, I mean, yeah, so that's kind of part of that, is like I haven't really been paying that much attention. Like it's not really so present for me, which is probably super weird for a lot of people to hear that. But it's
No, but that's
because
I love that. That's the kind of astrologer slash coach that you are using this as a tool, obviously.
mm-hmm. Yeah, well, but what's interesting is that I have seen so many debates online of people arguing about this, like a set of astrologers saying like this is bullshit, like this there's nothing astrological about this 8-8 Lionsgate portal, like that's not astrology. And like if you're an astrologer saying like talking about it, you're really like demeaning our craft and all this stuff. And then there's this other side of like, yeah, but it's a significant energetic portal and like things shift over time, and whether it's like an ancient tool or not, it's still like real and we're experiencing the energy of it. And so yeah, it's so interesting, like these people are like really arguing about this
I
on
am staying. Yeah, I have to put my blinkers on because I go more to because there's also the same as with the celestial and the galactic channelers. Galactic channelers connect more to the Syrian star seed and as a how do I say it? Nation might be maybe wrong, but as beings, a group of beings, souls that are from Sirius, whereas the celestials are more connected with the archetypes, the energies that we're working with. And so for us, for example, the veil is thinner. It's the same around Christmas, New Year's, the veil is thinner. So in meditations, you might experience more sensations. You might find it easier to connect to your guides or loved ones, right? Or receive guidance because of how, the veil is thinner. So it's almost like your analytical mind doesn't get to interfere so much because the energies are more powerful than normal. And I always think, there's all these different ways and names, and because we're not talking about a physical thing. I mean, if you looked up into the sky, you wouldn't see a beam of light coming down, right? Like, even though it's been illustrated like that, you don't see this, but it's just, I guess, like a way to explain, the last couple of weeks you felt all this stuff was happening, or is some out of your control, things are happening. And that is why to really get you to look at the triggers, look at what triggers you. Why are you annoyed? Why is this bothering you? Why are you out of alignment there, right? So it kind of gives you that. And then, go into a meditation and ask for that guidance. Ask, if you need clarity or whatever, and you'll find that it comes through easier. But again, we're not talking about anything physical. So it's not like, I can say definitely if you look up there at 8 p.m., you will see this beam of light. Just stand underneath it and it will hit you, right? It's just sensations. Like in my group yesterday, it was so fantastic because I had older ladies as well, and two of them who don't know each other saw the same sort of star, Darth Vader slash samurai being come to them. Not, there was no fear, no nothing, but both of them saw it. A few heard purring in the music, and the music that I was playing were just these what are they called? Binaural beat type things. So there was no animal nature sound. So it was just, and synchronicities like that, where they go like, oh, I felt this, or I felt like someone put their hand on my,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I shared with you when we first started speaking, energetically, I've definitely been feeling like very strong, intense things. Yeah.
Good for manifesting. If there's anything you want to manifest, this is the thing. This
Yeah.
is the time.
Yes, exactly.
But I'm looking forward to being here with you tomorrow and sharing what I've got on you.
Me too.
That's so good. Oh, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much. This is so beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
So will you be comfortable with me sharing video maybe on YouTube, audio on podcast in a couple of weeks or whenever